A shy young woman bumps into the most feared billionaire alive, and in the very first second, he whispers the exact childhood nickname only her first love ever knew. My first love was reincarnated as the most feared billionaire. What happened next? Starts right here, because this billionaire doesn't just recognize her, he remembers everything. He claims he died once, came back in a new body, and has been searching for her across lifetimes. But before she can even breathe, a dangerous warning lights up his phone. Someone wants to erase every memory he has of her, forever. Now she's trapped between fear and fate, as the world's coldest man suddenly becomes the one person begging her to trust him. But if she walks away, she loses the boy she loved, and if she believes him, she might lose everything else. So what do you do when the man the world fears the most says he's the only one who's ever loved you, and someone is willing to destroy him to keep you apart? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now. And if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The soft morning light filtered through the library's windows, casting gentle shadows across rows of well-loved books. Elara James moved with practiced grace between the shelves, her fingers trailing along familiar spines as she restored each returned volume to its proper place. The scent of old pages and leather bindings filled the air, mingling with the faint aroma of coffee from her still steaming cup on the front desk. She had already completed her morning routine, unlocking the heavy wooden doors at exactly 8 o'clock, raising the cream-colored blinds to welcome the day, and arranging the plump cushions in the children's reading nook where she would later host story time. Everything was precisely as it should be, predictable and peaceful, just the way she liked it. The soft chime of the doorbell caught her attention. Elara glanced up from her cart of books, ready to offer her usual warm welcome, but the words died in her throat. A man stood in the entrance, his presence somehow filling the entire space. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that screamed custom tailoring, with broad shoulders and an air of quiet authority that made her heart skip a beat. But it wasn't his commanding presence that made her pause. There was something hauntingly familiar about him, something she couldn't quite place. She watched as his eyes scanned the room, eventually landing on her. The intensity of his gaze made her fingers tighten around the book she held. "Good morning," she managed, her voice steady despite the strange flutter in her stomach. "Can I help you find something?" He took a step forward, then another, moving with the measured grace of a man used to controlling every situation. But as he drew closer, something changed. He stopped abruptly, as if he'd walked into an invisible wall. The color drained from his face, and his breath caught audibly in his throat. "Little star," he whispered. The book slipped from Elara's nerveless fingers, landing with a dull thud on the carpeted floor. That name! That impossible name! Nobody had called her that in 15 years. Nobody except Jordan Hayes, her first love, who had died in a car accident when they were both 17. She bent to retrieve the fallen book, grateful for the chance to hide her face as she struggled to compose herself. When she straightened, she found herself looking into eyes that seemed to hold countless unspoken words. "I'm Draven Locke," he said quietly. And her heart stuttered again for an entirely different reason. Everyone knew that name, Draven Locke, the ruthless billionaire who could destroy entire companies with a single phone call. His reputation for cold efficiency and merciless business tactics had earned him countless headlines and even more enemies. Yet here he stood in her small community library, looking at her as if he knew her very soul. "How?" she began, then stopped, unsure what question to ask first. How did he know that name? How could he possibly know something so private, so precious? "We need to talk," he said, his voice gentle despite the gravity in his expression. "Somewhere private, if possible." Elara knew she should be afraid. Everything she'd ever read about Draven Lock suggested she should run in the opposite direction. Instead, she found herself nodding slowly. "There's a study room in the back," she said, gesturing toward the hallway behind her. As she led the way, her mind raced with questions. The soft sound of his expensive shoes on the carpet behind her seemed to echo in time with her thundering heart. She opened the door to the small study room, with its round table and comfortable chairs, walls lined with reference books rarely disturbed by the library's regular patrons. She closed the door behind them, then turned to face him. In the confined space, his presence seemed even more overwhelming. But it was the look in his eyes that truly unsettled her, a mixture of pain, hope, and something that looked remarkably like recognition. "Please," she said, gesturing to one of the chairs. "Sit down and explain how you know that name." He remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back as if to keep them still. "It's complicated," he said, and for the first time, she heard uncertainty in his voice. "What I'm about to tell you will sound impossible. More impossible than a stranger knowing something only one person ever called me." Elara couldn't keep the tremor from her voice. "A person who died 15 years ago. Jordan Hayes didn't die in that car crash," he said quietly. "Not completely." Elara felt her knees weaken, and she gripped the back of a chair for support. "What are you talking about?" "I remember everything, little star," he continued, his voice dropping to barely more than a whisper. "I remember the treehouse in your backyard where we used to read together. I remember how you always smelled like vanilla and old books, even back then. I remember the day I gave you that nickname. You were wearing that ridiculous glow-in-the-dark star t-shirt, and you were so excited about the astronomy book your grandmother had given you." Each word hit her like a physical blow. These weren't things anyone could have researched or discovered. These were intimate details of her childhood, precious memories she had locked away in her heart. "This isn't possible," she whispered, but even as she said it, she found herself studying his face more carefully. There was nothing of Jordan's boyish features in Draven's sharp, masculine angles. Where Jordan had been all sunny smiles and easy laughter, Draven radiated control and carefully contained power. They were as different as day and night. And yet there was something in the way he looked at her, something in the gentle tone he used only when speaking to her, that tugged at her memories. "I know it sounds crazy," he said, taking a careful step closer. "I didn't understand it myself for years. I woke up in a hospital after my own accident, with 2 sets of memories in my head, my life as Draven Lock, and every moment I lived as Jordan Hayes, including every moment with you." Elara shook her head, trying to clear it. "You're talking about reincarnation, but Jordan and I were the same age. You can't be much older than I am now." "Not reincarnation," he corrected gently. "Something else, something I still don't fully understand. But I know who I was, and I know who I am now. And both of those people have loved you, little star." The use of the nickname again made her breath catch. She studied him carefully, looking for any sign of deception, any hint that this was some elaborate trick. But all she saw was raw honesty in his eyes, and a vulnerability that seemed completely at odds with everything she'd ever read about Draven Lock. "Prove it," she whispered. "Tell me something only Jordan would know, something that was never written down, never shared with anyone else." His expression softened, and for just a moment she caught a glimpse of the boy she had loved in the man before her. "The night before the accident," he said quietly. "We sat on your front porch swing. You were worried about your college applications, even though we both knew you'd get in anywhere you applied. You told me you were scared of leaving your grandmother alone, and I promised that no matter where we ended up, we'd always come back to check on her. Then you looked up at the stars and said, "Sometimes I wish we could just stay right here forever." Alara finished, her voice breaking. And you said, "Why wish on stars when I'm holding one right here?" They spoke the words together, and Alara felt her world tilt on its axis. She sank into the nearest chair, her legs no longer able to support her. "This can't be real," she whispered, but even as she said it, something deep in her soul recognized the truth of his words. Draven, or Jordan, or whoever he truly was, remained where he stood, giving her space to process. "I know this is overwhelming," he said softly. "I've had years to come to terms with it, and I still sometimes have trouble believing it myself. But when I saw you just now, shelving those books exactly the way you used to arrange your grandmother's bookshelf." He trailed off, emotion making his voice rough. Alara looked up at him, really looked at him, seeing past the expensive suit and the powerful persona. She saw the way his hands were clenched at his sides, the slight tremor in them betraying his own nervousness. She saw the hope and fear warring in his eyes. Most of all, she saw the way he looked at her, like she was both a miracle and a memory come to life. "Why now?" she asked finally. "Why come find me after all these years?" "Because I finally found the courage," he admitted, "and because I couldn't stay away any longer. The world knows me as Draven Locke, the man who tears companies apart. But you knew me when I was just Jordan Hayes, the boy who loved books and stars and you. I need to know if there's any part of that boy you can see in me now." The small study room felt both too intimate and not private enough as Draven gently closed the door behind them. The soft click seemed to seal them into their own world, away from the familiar comfort of Alara's library. Morning sunlight filtered through the narrow window, casting patterns on the worn carpet, while the scent of old books and lemon cleaning solution hung in the air. Alara's hands trembled as she gripped the back of a chair. "How is this possible? Jordan died. I was at his funeral. I put flowers on his grave every year for the past decade." Draven moved slowly, as if afraid of startling her, and settled into the chair across the table. His expensive suit looked out of place against the humble furniture, but his eyes held that same earnest look that had always made Jordan so easy to trust. "I know it sounds impossible," he said softly, "but do you remember the paper star charm I made you in 7th grade? You were having a bad day because Tommy Jenkins made fun of your glasses. I folded it out of your failed math test, the one where you got a B+ and cried because it wasn't an A." Alara's breath caught. She had never told anyone about that charm, not even her grandmother. It had been such a small moment, but so perfectly Jordan, taking something that made her sad and turning it into something beautiful. "You said—" Her voice wavered. "You said that even failed tests could become stars if you looked at them the right way." Draven's eyes softened. "And you kept it in your pencil case until it fell apart 3 months later. You were so upset, but I told you it was okay because real stars don't last forever either." Alara finished. "They just burn bright, enough to leave their light behind." She sank into the chair across from him, her legs no longer able to support her. "How do you know these things?" "Because I was there," he said simply. "I died as Jordan Hayes, but somehow I woke up again as Draven Locke. Different body, different life, but with every memory intact, including every moment I spent with you." He leaned forward, his voice dropping lower. "I remember the way you always smelled like vanilla because your grandmother baked so much. I remember how you used to bite your lip when you were reading something exciting, and how you cried at the end of Charlotte's Web even though you'd read it 6 times. I remember the exact shade of purple you wore to our 8th grade dance, and how you stepped on my feet 3 times, but I didn't care because I was just happy to be holding you." Tears spilled down Alara's cheeks as memories she'd kept locked away came flooding back. "Jordan," she whispered, then caught herself. "I mean, Draven, I don't even know what to call you." "Either name is fine when it's you," he said gently. "They're both me, just different versions. The boy who loved you then, and the man who—" A sharp vibration cut through the moment. Draven pulled his phone from his pocket, and Alara watched as his face transformed. The soft vulnerability vanished, replaced by something hard and dangerous. His jaw clenched as he read the message, and his hand tightened around the phone until his knuckles went white. "What's wrong?" Alara asked, her heart starting to race at his obvious distress. "We need to leave. Now." Draven was already on his feet, his movements swift and precise. "Is there a staff exit?" "Yes, through the break room, but show me." His tone left no room for argument, but his touch was gentle as he helped her up. "Please, Alara, I promise I'll explain everything, but right now we need to get you somewhere safe." She wanted to protest, to demand answers, but something in his expression stopped her. This wasn't the calculating businessman she'd read about in news articles, or even the tender boy from her memories. This was someone who knew about real danger, and how to handle it. Alara led him through the library's back hallway to the employee break room. Her mind was spinning, trying to make sense of everything that had happened in the last 30 minutes. Jordan was alive, sort of. He was also Draven Locke. And now something had him scared enough to rush her out of her own library. As they reached the break room's back door, Draven paused. He glanced at his phone again, and Alara caught a glimpse of the message that had changed everything. "She's the key. Remove her." The word sent ice through her veins. "Remove her? What did that mean? Who had sent it?" Draven pushed open the door, checking the alley before guiding her out. The morning air was cool against her face, and somewhere nearby, a car horn honked. Such normal sounds for a moment that felt anything but normal. Standing in that narrow alley, with brick walls rising on either side and the sound of the city surrounding them, Alara felt the full weight of reality settle over her. Her ordinary Tuesday morning had shattered into pieces, and she knew with absolute certainty that nothing would ever be the same. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Draven's hand was warm and steady against her back as he guided her toward a black car she hadn't noticed before. "Somewhere safe," he repeated. "I won't let anyone hurt you, little star. Not this time." The childhood nickname hit her differently now, carrying the weight of both past and present. She looked up at the man beside her. This strange combination of the boy she'd loved and the powerful stranger she'd read about, and realized she wasn't just leaving the library. She was leaving behind the simple, predictable life she'd built for herself, stepping into something she couldn't begin to understand. But as Draven opened the car door for her, his eyes still carrying that mixture of determination and tenderness that was uniquely his, she knew she didn't have a choice. The threat in that message was real, and whatever was happening, she was already part of it. The car door closed with a soft thud, and Alara watched her familiar world disappear as they pulled away from the library. Her heart pounded with a mixture of fear and something else, something that felt suspiciously like hope or destiny, or both. The afternoon sunlight cast long shadows in the alley as Draven guided Alara between the weathered brick buildings. His usual composed demeanor had given way to an urgent intensity that made her pulse quicken. Traffic sounds from the main street echoed off the walls, creating a strange bubble of privacy in the urban canyon. "I know this is overwhelming," Draven said, his voice low and rushed. But there are people, powerful people, who've been watching me for years. They want to ensure I remain focused solely on business matters. Any emotional attachments, especially these memories connecting us, they see as—" He paused, searching for the right words. "A liability." Alara hugged her arms around herself, trying to process everything. The warm autumn air suddenly felt chilly. Who are these people? Board members, business rivals, people who profit from keeping me isolated and cold. His jaw tightened. They've had me monitored since I first started showing signs of remembering my past life. They thought they could control those memories, control me. A delivery truck rumbled past the alley entrance, and Alara jumped slightly. Draven's hand immediately went to her shoulder, steadying her. The gesture was so familiar, so Jordan, that it made her heart ache. "I need time," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is all too much to process at once. I should visit my Aunt Rosamond tonight. She always helps me think things through." Relief softened Draven's features. "Of course, take whatever time you need. Just—" He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, writing something on the back. "This is my private number. If anything feels wrong, if you sense anyone watching you, call me immediately." Alara took the card, her fingers trembling slightly. "I will, and I promise to think about everything you've said." "That's all I ask, little star." The rest of her workday passed in a blur. Alara went through the motions of checking out books and organizing shelves, but her mind kept drifting to Draven's revelations and the threatening message he'd received. By closing time, she was mentally exhausted. The city bus ride to her aunt's house gave her time to gather her thoughts. She watched the familiar neighborhoods roll past, trying to reconcile the boy she'd loved with the powerful man he'd become. The sun was setting when she finally walked up the cracked concrete path to Aunt Rosamond's small house. Warm light spilled from the windows, and the scent of cinnamon and vanilla wrapped around her like a hug. Before she could even knock, the door swung open. Aunt Rosamond stood there, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in its usual neat bun, her dark eyes knowing. "I had a feeling you'd come tonight," she said, pulling Alara into a tight embrace. "Come in, child. I just made tea." The inside of the house was exactly as it had always been, slightly cluttered but deeply comfortable, with well-worn furniture and walls covered in family photos. Alara sank into her favorite armchair while her aunt bustled around the kitchen, returning with 2 steaming mugs of chamomile tea. "Now then," Rosamond said, settling into her rocking chair, "tell me what's troubling you." The whole story came pouring out. Draven's appearance at the library, his impossible memories of being Jordan, the threatening message, everything. Aunt Rosamond listened without interrupting, slowly rocking back and forth, her expression thoughtful. When Alara finally finished, her aunt set down her empty mug and stood up. "There's something you need to see." She disappeared into her study, returning moments later with a yellowed envelope. "I've been keeping this until the right time. I think that time is now." Alara took the envelope with trembling hands. It was a letter from Memorial Hospital, dated 12 years ago, right after the car accident that had nearly killed her. Her eyes widened as she read. "An anonymous donor paid for my surgery," she whispered. "But the bills were enormous. We never knew who—" "Keep reading," Aunt Rosamond urged gently. Alara's heart stopped as she saw the name at the bottom of the letter, Draven Locke. "But that's impossible," she breathed. "I'd never even met him then. How did he know?" "Perhaps some part of him remembered even then," her aunt said softly. "Love has a way of reaching across time, across lives even. I've always believed that." Alara stared at the letter, tears blurring her vision. "He saved my life, and I never knew. Stay here tonight." Aunt Rosamond said, squeezing her hand. "Give yourself time to process everything. Your old room is always ready for you." That night, lying in her childhood bedroom, Ilara replayed everything Draven had said. The paper star charm, their first dance, details no one else could have known. And now this, proof that even before they'd met in this life, some part of him had been watching over her. The moonlight filtered through her window, casting soft shadows on the wall. In the quiet darkness, surrounded by memories of her past, Ilara felt the walls she'd built around her heart beginning to crack. The impossible was becoming possible, and the simple life she'd known was transforming into something both terrifying and wonderful. The Wednesday morning dawned crisp and clear, with golden sunlight painting the library's brick facade. Ilara walked the familiar path toward work, her aunt's revelations from the night before still swirling in her mind. As she rounded the corner, she stopped short. A sleek black SUV was parked in front of the library's main entrance. Draven Locke stood beside it, his tall frame looking less intimidating in the gentle morning light. Next to him was a broad-shouldered man with military-straight posture, surveying the quiet street with alert eyes. Ilara's heart skipped as Draven noticed her. He straightened, smoothing his tailored jacket with a gesture that seemed almost nervous. "Good morning," he said softly. "I hope I'm not overstepping by being here." "No, it's—" Ilara cleared her throat. "It's all right." The man beside Draven stepped forward, extending his hand. "Dale Hale, ma'am, head of security for Mr. Locke." Dale's handshake was firm but gentle, his weathered face kind. Something about his calm presence made Ilara feel more at ease. "I wanted to apologize," Draven said, "for overwhelming you yesterday. I know it was a lot to take in, and I handled it poorly." He hesitated. "Would you let me explain everything properly? There's a cafe around the corner that opens early." Ilara glanced at the library doors, then back at Draven. In the morning sunshine, she could see faint shadows under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept well either. "I have an hour before we open," she said. Relief washed over Draven's features. "That's more than enough time." Dale moved to the driver's seat while Draven opened the rear door for Ilara. The interior smelled of leather and something crisp, like pine. The short drive was silent, but not uncomfortably so. The cafe was a cozy place with exposed brick walls and warm wooden tables. Dale chose a quiet corner booth that gave them privacy while allowing him to watch the entrance. A young waitress brought them coffee and fresh baked muffins that filled the air with the scent of cinnamon and blueberries. "I should start at the beginning," Draven said, wrapping his hands around his coffee cup. "The memories started when I was 15. At first, they were just fragments, a laugh, a flash of your smile, the feeling of paper between my fingers as I folded that star charm." He looked down. "I thought I was losing my mind." Ilara broke off a piece of muffin, letting the warmth seep into her fingers. "What changed?" "I saw your name." His voice softened. "I was 18, reviewing files for my father's charitable foundation. There was a stack of emergency surgery cases needing funding approval. When I saw Ilara James, everything clicked into place. All the memories, all the feelings, they suddenly made sense." "The hospital letter," Ilara whispered. "Aunt Rosamond showed me last night." Draven nodded. "I knew it was you. I remembered everything about us by then, but I was terrified of reaching out. How could I explain that I was Jordan, but also wasn't? That I remembered loving you with all my heart, but was trapped in a different life, a different name?" Dale shifted slightly in his seat, his protective instincts visible in the way he positioned himself between their booth and the rest of the cafe. But his expression was gentle as he watched Draven speak. "So I did what I could from a distance," Draven continued. "Made sure your surgery was covered, kept tabs to ensure you were safe. He ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture so familiar it made Alara's chest ache. Jordan used to do the same thing when he was nervous. I threw myself into building my company, thinking if I worked hard enough I could forget. But I never could. The morning light streamed through the cafe's windows, catching the silver threads in Dale's short hair and softening Draven's sharp features. In that moment, Alara could see glimpses of the boy she'd known, in the way Draven's fingers fidgeted with his napkin, in the slight tilt of his head as he watched her. "Yesterday," he said carefully. "Seeing you in the library. I didn't handle it well. The shock of finally being face to face, then that threatening message." He straightened. "But I want to do this right. I want a chance to show you that even though I'm different now, the core of who I was, who I am, hasn't changed." Alara took a sip of her cooling coffee, studying him. The impossible truth of his words rang in her heart, backed by too many details, too many perfect memories to be coincidence. "I would need time," she said slowly, "to process all of this, to get to know who you are now." "Of course," Draven said quickly. "We could start slowly. Maybe dinner sometimes, or walks in public places where you feel comfortable." He glanced at Dale. Dale or another security team member would always be nearby, given the current situation. But there would be no pressure, no expectations. Dale nodded reassuringly. "Your safety would be my primary concern, Ma'am." Alara looked between them. The steady, protective former Marine and the powerful businessman who remembered folding paper stars with small, boyish hands. The morning sun painted everything in gentle gold, making this surreal moment feel somehow more real, more possible. "Yes," she found herself saying. I think I'd like that." The smile that spread across Draven's face transformed him, breaking through his carefully controlled exterior like sunshine through clouds. For a brief moment, he was purely Jordan, young and hopeful, and full of love. They finished their muffins and coffee as the morning grew later. Dale drove them back to the library with time to spare before opening. As Alara stepped out of the SUV, Draven caught her hand gently. "Thank you," he said softly, "for giving me a chance to explain, for being willing to try." She squeezed his hand once before letting go. "Thank you for saving my life back then, even if you couldn't tell me it was you." The peaceful morning shattered with a single buzz from Draven's phone. His hand froze midway to his coffee cup, color draining from his face as he read the news alert. Alara watched his normally composed expression crack, revealing something she'd never seen before. Raw fear. "Knox," he breathed, the word barely audible over the gentle cafe chatter around them. "He's making his move." Dale leaned forward immediately, his military training evident in his swift, controlled movements. "What's happening, sir?" "Bradford Knox just called an emergency press conference." Draven's voice was tight as he turned the phone so they could see the breaking news headline. "He's announcing plans for a hostile takeover of Locke Industries. Claims I'm—" His jaw clenched. "Claims I'm mentally unstable and unfit to run the company." Alara felt her heart skip. Can he do that? If he convinces enough board members, yes. Draven's fingers tightened around his phone. "Knox has been trying to get control of my company for years. He's ruthless, manipulative. This isn't just about business. He wants to destroy everything I've built." Dale's eyes narrowed as he scanned the cafe windows. "Sir, we need to move. The press will be swarming every location you're known to frequent." As if on cue, a small crowd began gathering outside the cafe's front windows, several people holding professional cameras. Draven cursed under his breath, his CEO mask slipping further to reveal genuine distress. "This isn't just about the company, is it?" Alara asked softly, understanding dawning in her chest. What aren't you telling me? Draven met her eyes, and the pain she saw there made her breath catch. If Nox succeeds in proving I'm unstable, the board can force me into psychological evaluation and treatment. They could strip me of control not just of the company, but of my own life decisions. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. The kind of treatment Nox would arrange. It would wipe away everything that makes me who I am, including every memory of being Jordan. Alara felt the world tilt beneath her feet. They can't do that. That's illegal. Nox has connections everywhere, Dale said grimly, rising from his seat. And money can make a lot of things appear legal. We need to leave. Now, through the kitchen. The cafe's owner, seeing the growing media circus outside, hurried over to their table. Mr. Locke, you can use our back exit. Follow me. They moved quickly through the warm kitchen, past startled staff members and the smell of baking bread. Dale led the way, his presence calm but alert as they emerged into a narrow service alley. A sleek black SUV was already waiting, one of Dale's security team at the wheel. I'll have someone bring your car home, sir, Dale said, opening the back door. Right now, we need to get you somewhere secure. Draven turned to Alara, conflict clear on his face. I'm so sorry. This isn't how I wanted today to go. I never meant to drag you into this mess. She could see the weight of it all crushing him, the threat to his company, his memories, his very identity. The boy who had once folded paper stars was now a man fighting to keep hold of those precious memories against forces that would tear them away forever. Let me take you home, he said softly. It's not safe for you to be seen with me right now. Nox will use anything, anyone, he can against me. The SUV engine hummed quietly as Dale kept watch at the alley's entrance. Alara could hear the growing commotion from the street, voices calling Draven's name, cameras clicking. This was his daily reality, she realized, a world of power plays and threats wrapped in business suits and press releases. They drove through back streets to avoid the media, finally pulling up outside Alara's apartment building as dusk painted the sky in deep purples and blues. She stood on the sidewalk, gripping her bag tightly as Draven looked at her through the car's open window. I'll understand if you want to walk away, he said quietly. This isn't your fight. Alara stood there in the growing darkness, feeling the weight of the choice before her. She could turn around, walk up to her quiet apartment, and return to her peaceful life at the library. Safe, secure, untouched by the dangerous world of corporate power plays and psychological manipulation. Or she could choose to help protect the last living connection to Jordan, the boy who had given her paper stars and first love, who now lived on in the memories of a man fighting to keep his soul intact. The evening breeze carried the scent of rain as Alara stood at this crossroads, knowing her next choice would change everything. Alara spent most of Wednesday night tossing and turning in her bed, her thoughts swirling like autumn leaves in a storm. The gentle ticking of her bedside clock seemed to echo the rhythm of her racing heart as she replayed everything that had happened. By 4:30 in the morning, she had kicked off her covers for the dozenth time, finally accepting that real sleep wasn't coming. She sat up in the pre-dawn, darkness wrapping her arms around her knees. The weight of Draven's situation pressed heavily on her conscience. How could she return to shelving books and reading stories to children while knowing that someone was trying to erase Jordan's memories forever? When the first hints of sunrise began painting her walls in soft pink light, Alara reached for her phone. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long moment before she typed, "I want to help. When can we meet?" The response came almost immediately. "Thank you. Dale will pick you up at 7:30. True to his word, At exactly 7:30, a black SUV pulled up outside her apartment building. Dale stepped out, his presence reassuring in its steadiness. "Good morning, Miss James. Did you sleep well?" "Not really," she admitted, climbing into the back seat. "Understandable." Dale's eyes met hers briefly in the rearview mirror. "Just so you know, we've increased security measures significantly. You'll notice some changes at headquarters." The drive through the city felt surreal. Streets that had always seemed so familiar now held a hint of threat, every passing car a potential observer. When they approached Locke Industries' gleaming skyscraper, Elara noticed what Dale meant about increased security. Guards stood at every entrance, and she spotted several others in plain clothes patrolling the perimeter. Dale led her through a private entrance, using multiple key cards and biometric scanners. "We've limited access to the executive floors," he explained as they rode the elevator. "Only trusted personnel allowed up here now." The elevator opened directly into Draven's office suite on the 68th floor. Elara's first thought was how different it felt from what she'd expected. While the space was undeniably modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows and sleek furniture, there was a warmth to it she hadn't anticipated. Fresh flowers sat in crystal vases, and the morning sun cast a golden glow across the pale wood floors. Draven looked up from his desk as they entered, and the relief that washed over his face was unmistakable. He crossed the room in quick strides, stopping just short of embracing her. "You came," he said softly, as if he still couldn't quite believe it. "I couldn't just walk away," she replied, noting the dark circles under his eyes that matched her own. He gestured to a comfortable seating area where coffee and breakfast pastries waited. "We need to bring you up to speed on everything that's happening. I've gathered my most trusted team members." As if on cue, 3 people entered the room. Draven introduced them. Sarah Chen, his chief of digital security, Marcus Williams, legal counsel, and Patricia Torres, his executive assistant for the past 15 years. They all greeted Elara with a mixture of curiosity and respect. "Someone leaked information about my memories to the board late yesterday," Draven explained as they settled into their seats. "They're presenting it as evidence of mental instability, claiming I've been making irrational decisions based on delusional beliefs about reincarnation." Sarah leaned forward, her expression intense. "We're trying to trace the leak, but whoever did this was careful. They've been planning it for a while." "Knox," Dale said grimly from his position near the door. "Most likely," Marcus agreed, "but proving it is another matter entirely." Throughout the morning, Elara watched Draven interact with his team. She noticed how different he was here, away from public scrutiny. His voice was softer, his movements more natural. When Patricia brought him documents to sign, he asked about her son's college applications. When Sarah presented a security report, he listened with genuine concern rather than cold authority. Around noon, Patricia ordered lunch for everyone. As they ate together in a comfortable conference room, Elara saw moments where Draven's smile echoed Jordan's so clearly it made her heart ache. She caught Dale watching them both, his experienced eyes missing nothing. "You know," Dale said quietly when he found himself next to Elara at the coffee machine later that afternoon. "I've worked for Mr. Locke for 8 years. I've never seen him as centered as he is when you're nearby." Elara felt her cheeks warm. "I'm not doing anything special. Sometimes just being present is enough." Dale's voice held a gentle wisdom. "You anchor him to something real, something beyond all this." He gestured to the corporate trappings around them. The day passed in a blur of meetings and strategy sessions. Elara contributed when she could, offering a fresh perspective that seemed to help the team think differently about their approach. But mostly, she observed, She watched how Draven's carefully constructed public persona softened around the edges when he thought no one was looking. She saw how he touched the paper star charm he kept in his pocket when making difficult decisions. As evening approached, Draven insisted on arranging secure transportation to take her home. They stood near the private elevator, the city lights beginning to twinkle beyond the windows. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I know being here puts you at risk. Knox's people will be watching everyone who enters this building." "I made my choice," Alara replied, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "I couldn't let them take Jordan's memories away, not when they're finally somewhere safe." Something flickered in Draven's eyes, gratitude, relief, and something deeper she wasn't ready to name. Dale appeared with perfect timing, ready to escort her home. "We'll send a car for you tomorrow," Draven said. If you're willing to come back." Alara nodded, knowing that despite the danger, despite the complexity of it all, she was exactly where she needed to be. "I'll be here." The morning sun cast long shadows across the city streets as Dale's SUV wound its way through the quieter outskirts of town. Alara sat in the back seat, watching the neighborhood change from sleek high-rises to modest homes and small businesses. Beside her, Draven seemed lost in thought, his fingers absently touching the paper star charm in his pocket. "We're almost there," Dale announced from the driver's seat, turning onto Cedar Street. The senior housing complex came into view, 3 weathered brick buildings surrounded by small but well-tended gardens. Handmade signs hung in several windows. "Save our homes," and "Veterans live here." An American flag flew at half-staff near the entrance, its edges slightly frayed but dignified. As they pulled into the parking lot, Alara noticed a group of residents gathered near the main entrance. Some used walkers or canes, while others stood tall despite their years, wearing veteran caps adorned with military pins. Their faces showed worry but determination. "I didn't know there were so many veterans here," Draven said quietly, his expression troubled. 37 veterans and their families," Dale provided, his own military background evident in his respectful tone. "Plus another 48 residents, mostly widows and retired teachers." Alara's heart tightened as she watched an elderly woman carefully water the potted petunias by the entrance. "These aren't just buildings," she said softly. "This is their community." They stepped out of the SUV, and immediately the atmosphere shifted. The residents recognized Draven, the man who had ordered their homes demolished to make way for luxury condominiums. Some straightened their shoulders defiantly, while others seemed to shrink back. A tall man with silver hair stepped forward, his Vietnam veteran cap positioned precisely on his head. "Mr. Locke," he said, his voice steady. "I'm George Martinez. We weren't expecting you today." Before Draven could respond, an elderly woman with kind eyes and silver curls hurried forward. "Oh, let me get everyone together. We've prepared our presentation about why the complex should be saved." Her enthusiasm was touching, even as her hands trembled slightly. "Mrs. Chen," George said gently. "I don't think that won't be necessary." Draven interrupted, his voice carrying across the courtyard. Everyone froze, expecting the worst. But then Draven continued, "Because I'm here to tell you personally that the demolition order has been reversed. Your homes are safe." For a moment, absolute silence fell over the courtyard. Then Mrs. Chen burst into tears of joy, and the courtyard erupted in cheers and exclamations. Alara watched as relief transformed the faces around them, years seeming to fall away as hope returned. "You mean it?" George asked, his military bearing softening slightly. "No tricks?" "No tricks," Draven confirmed. "My team will draw up new contracts this afternoon, guaranteeing your tenancy and implementing needed repairs and updates to the buildings." Mrs. Chen was already on her phone, likely spreading the news to residents who weren't present. Within minutes, more people emerged from the buildings, some still in bathrobes and slippers, drawn by the commotion. "Would you like a tour?" George offered, seemingly reconsidering his initial impression of Draven. "Show you what makes this place special." As they walked the grounds, residents came up to share their stories. A retired nurse who had served in Desert Storm showed them the community garden she had started. A widower who had lost his wife last winter described how his neighbors had helped him through his grief. Each story added another layer to the rich tapestry of lives intertwined in this place. During a quiet moment, as they paused near a small rose garden, Draven turned to Alara. "Jordan would have never let this happen," he said softly. "He would have seen what I missed, that buildings are more than just property values. You saw it today?" Alara reminded him gently. "That's what matters." They spent the afternoon walking the grounds together, finding quiet moments between meeting residents to talk. Near a bench overlooking the garden, Draven shared another memory from Jordan's life. "You used to wear your hair in 2 braids, he said, smiling at the memory. "Except for that summer when you were 11, when you cut it short because you thought it would help you swim faster at the community pool." Alara's breath caught. "I never told anyone why I cut my hair that summer." "You were convinced you'd make the swim team," Draven continued, his voice warm with the memory. "And you did, even though you were terrified of the deep end. I used to stand at the edge of the pool during your practices, making sure you knew you weren't alone." Tears pricked at Alara's eyes. Each memory he shared was like a key unlocking a door she had closed long ago, letting in light and air and life. As the afternoon progressed, word of Draven's decision spread rapidly online. Local news outlets picked up the story, sharing photos of him talking with veterans and elderly residents. The feared billionaire known for ruthless business tactics was suddenly being portrayed in a new light. "Your PR team will have a field day with this," Dale commented as they watched a group of residents organizing an impromptu celebration in the community room. "I didn't do it for PR," Draven replied, his eyes following Alara as she helped Mrs. Chen arrange cookies on a plate. "I know," Dale said simply, and in those 2 words was understanding of how much had changed. The sun was setting when they finally prepared to leave. Residents came out to wave goodbye, their faces bright with joy and relief. Mrs. Chen pressed a container of homemade cookies into Alara's hands, whispering, "Thank you, dear. Whatever you said to him, thank you." As Dale drove them away from the complex, Alara watched Draven's reflection in the window. His public mask had softened, revealing more of the boy she had once known in the man he had become. The impossible was beginning to feel possible, and her carefully guarded heart was remembering how to hope. "Would you like to stop for dinner?" Draven asked as they approached the city center. "Actually, I think I'd like to go home and process everything," Alara replied honestly. "Today was incredible." Draven nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Of course. Dale will make sure you get home safely." As the SUV turned onto her street, Alara realized that logic couldn't explain the events of the day, or the way her heart had begun to recognize truth in impossible places. Sometimes, she was learning, you had to let your heart lead the way. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, the kind of spring day that seemed to wash the world clean. Alara had just finished her morning coffee when she heard a gentle knock at her apartment door. Opening it, she found Draven standing there, dressed more casually than she had ever seen him, in dark jeans and a soft grey sweater. "I thought we might take a walk today," he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice. "There's somewhere special I'd like to show you." The drive took them to the east side of the city, where modest houses lined narrow streets and children played hopscotch on cracked sidewalks. As Dale parked the SUV, Alara noticed Draven's hands trembling slightly on his knees. "This is where Jordan lived," she whispered, recognition dawning as they stepped out onto the sidewalk. The neighborhood hadn't changed much in 15 years. The same corner store with its faded awning, the same rusty playground equipment in the small park. "Yes," Draven replied softly. "This is where it all began." They walked slowly down Mason Street, passing houses with peeling paint and chain-link fences. Children's bikes lay scattered on front lawns, and the sound of someone practicing piano drifted through an open window. Draven stopped in front of a worn 3-story apartment building with red brick facades. "Third floor, apartment 3B, he said, pointing up. Jordan's room had a window that looked out over the street. He used to sit there at night, watching the cars go by, dreaming of better things. Alara's throat tightened. "I remember visiting once. His mum made us grilled cheese sandwiches." "With tomato soup," Draven added, "and she always cut the sandwiches diagonally because she said it made them taste better." They continued walking, passing the playground where neighborhood kids still played. The metal slides gleamed in the morning sun, and the swings creaked gently in the breeze. "You fell off that swing set," Draven said, pointing to the tallest swing. "You were trying to go higher than anyone else. Jordan was terrified you'd hurt yourself, but you just got up, brushed off your knees, and tried again." Alara touched the chain of the swing, memories flooding back. "I was always trying to prove I wasn't scared of anything." "But you were," Draven said softly. "You were scared of thunderstorms and spiders and the dark. You just never let fear stop you." They walked past the corner store where they used to buy penny candy, past the spot where they had built a snowman one winter morning, past all the places that held pieces of their shared history. At each stop, Draven shared another memory, each one precise and vivid. Finally, they reached a small pocket park tucked between 2 buildings. A few wooden benches lined a concrete path, and wildflowers pushed up through cracks in the pavement. Draven led her to a specific spot near an old oak tree. "This is where Jordan gave you the paper star," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It was your 12th birthday. He had spent weeks learning how to fold origami stars from YouTube videos, practicing until his fingers were covered in paper cuts." Tears welled in Alara's eyes as she remembered that day. "He made it out of gold paper because he said I was his little star. You wore it on a string around your neck until it fell apart." Draven continued. "Jordan promised to make you another one, but he never got the chance." Alara finished, wiping her eyes. They found a small family-owned diner nearby for lunch, sliding into a worn vinyl booth. The waitress brought them plastic menus and tall glasses of ice water, treating them no differently than any other customers despite Draven's obvious wealth. Over plates of grilled cheese and French fries, comfort food that seemed fitting for the day, they talked about things they had never discussed before. "Do you believe in fate?" Alara asked, stirring her straw in her water glass. Draven considered the question carefully. "I used to think everything could be explained by logic and reason. But how do you explain this? How do you explain remembering a whole other life, remembering every detail about someone you loved?" "I don't know," Alara admitted. "My grandmother always said that love was bigger than life or death. I never really understood what she meant until now." They talked about loss, about Jordan's death, about Alara's mother, about the years they had spent carrying grief like a familiar weight. They talked about faith, about the things that couldn't be explained but could only be felt and trusted. "I spent so many years being Draven Locke," he said, pushing his empty plate aside. "Building walls, accumulating power, trying to control everything. But the memories of being Jordan, of knowing you, they changed everything. They reminded me that there's more to life than power and control. The afternoon light softened into evening as they continued talking. Other customers came and went, but they remained in their booth, sharing stories and memories, building bridges between past and present. "I'm not Jordan," Draven said finally, his voice gentle. "I carry his memories, his love for you, but I'm also someone else. Someone who's made mistakes, who's hurt people, who's tried so hard to be untouchable that he almost lost his soul." Elara reached across the table and took his hand. "Maybe that's the point. Maybe we're not supposed to just relive the past. Maybe we're supposed to learn from it, grow from it, build something new." The warmth of her hand in his felt like an anchor, grounding him in this moment. They weren't 12 years old anymore, meeting in a school playground. They were adults with scars and struggles and complicated lives. But something was shifting between them, something that felt both familiar and entirely new. The waitress brought their check, smiling at their still joined hands. Outside, the street lamps were beginning to flicker on, casting pools of light on the sidewalk. Dale waited patiently in the SUV, giving them space to experience this day in their own way. As they walked back to the car, Elara looked up at the emerging stars in the darkening sky. The past would always be there, a foundation of precious memories and shared love. But now, in the growing dusk of a Saturday evening, she felt something new taking root. Not just the echo of an old love, but the beginning of something fresh and real and present. The Sunday morning sun painted warm stripes across Elara's bedroom as she got ready, her hands slightly shaking as she fastened her mother's silver necklace. Yesterday's memories still felt fresh, walking through Jordan's old neighborhood, sharing lunch with Draven, feeling the walls between past and present slowly dissolving. A gentle knock at her apartment door announced Dale's arrival. When she opened it, the former Marine gave her one of his rare, warm smiles. "Good morning, Miss James," he said, standing aside to let her pass. "Mr. Locke asked me to pick you up a bit earlier today. He has somewhere special he'd like to show you." The drive took them away from the familiar city streets, winding along roads that curved through rolling hills. Elara watched the urban landscape give way to scattered trees and open sky. After about 45 minutes, Dale turned onto a narrow road that climbed steadily upward. Draven was already there when they arrived, standing next to his car in casual clothes, dark jeans and a light sweater that made him look more like the boy he once was than the businessman he'd become. His face softened when he saw her, and he reached for her hand as she approached. "Do you remember?" he said quietly. "When Jordan told you about a place where you could see the whole world?" Elara's breath caught. The cliffside overlook. He said his father brought him here once, before he left. Draven finished. "Jordan promised to bring you here someday." He led her along a well-maintained path, Dale keeping a respectful distance behind them. The trail opened onto a wide stone platform that jutted out over the valley below. Steel railings provided safety without blocking the spectacular view. The city sprawled out beneath them, its buildings catching the morning light like scattered gems. Beyond it, the landscape rolled away in waves of green and gold, meeting the horizon in a gentle blur of earth and sky. "Oh," Elara whispered, moving closer to the railing. "It's beautiful." "Jordan thought you'd love it," Draven said softly. "He used to imagine bringing you here, watching your face light up when you saw it for the first time." They stood in comfortable silence, letting the peaceful atmosphere wash over them. A warm breeze carried the scent of wild grass and late summer flowers. In the distance, birds wheeled through the air, their calls barely audible over the gentle rustle of leaves. "You know," Draven said after a while, his voice thoughtful. I spent years trying to understand these memories, trying to make sense of why I remembered being Jordan, why I remembered you so clearly when everything else from that life was fuzzy around the edges. He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. His touch was warm, steady, grounding. But standing here with you now, I finally understand. You're my constant, Alara. Across time, across lives, across everything that's changed. You're the one soul that anchors me. When I'm with you, both parts of me, Draven and Jordan, feel whole. Alara trembled slightly, her heart racing. I've been so afraid, she admitted. Afraid to believe this was real, afraid to trust what I was feeling. But being with you these past few days, seeing how the boy I loved lives on in the man you've become, I feel it too. This connection. It's like my heart recognized you before my mind could catch up. The golden hour light began to paint the sky in soft oranges and pinks, casting a warm glow over everything. A gentle wind played with Alara's curls, and Draven reached up to brush a strand from her face. I'm not asking you to forget Jordan, he said softly. He's part of who I am, part of our story, but I'm hoping you can love who I am now too. All of me. Alara looked up at him, seeing both the shadow of the boy she'd lost and the man who'd found his way back to her. I already do, she whispered. Draven's hand cradled her cheek, and she leaned into his touch. When their lips met, it felt like coming home. The kiss was soft, gentle, full of all the words they'd waited years to say. It held the sweetness of their childhood love and the deeper understanding of their adult hearts. When they finally pulled apart, Alara kept her eyes closed for a moment, savoring the feeling. When she opened them, Draven was looking at her with such tenderness it made her heart ache. The sun was beginning to set in earnest now, turning the sky into a canvas of deep golds and purples. Dale appeared quietly at the path entrance, a silent reminder that they needed to head back before dark. The drive home was peaceful, filled with comfortable silence and shared glances. Alara watched the passing landscape through the SUV's window, a small smile playing on her lips. After days of uncertainty and fear, after years of carrying the weight of loss, something had shifted, something had healed. She felt Draven's hand find hers in the gathering darkness of the car, and she squeezed it gently. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, not as echoes of the past, but as something new and precious, built on a foundation of memories, but reaching toward their own future. Dale glanced in the rearview mirror, a quiet satisfaction in his eyes as he watched his boss, his friend, finally find the peace he'd been searching for. The city lights began to appear in the distance, twinkling like earthbound stars, guiding them home. The harsh ring of her phone jolted Alara from sleep. Her bedroom was still dark, the digital clock showing 4:37 in the morning. Dale's name flashed on the screen. Dale, she answered, her voice rough with sleep. What's wrong? They took him. Dale's usually steady voice carried an edge of barely controlled panic. I'm 5 minutes from your apartment. Be ready. The call ended before she could respond. Alara's hands shook as she threw on clothes, her mind racing with terrible possibilities. The peaceful glow of yesterday's sunset at the Overlook felt like a distant dream. Exactly 5 minutes later, Dale's SUV pulled up outside. Alara rushed down the stairs and climbed in, noting his grim expression in the pre-dawn darkness. What happened? She demanded as Dale pulled away from the curb. Knox's men grabbed Draven from his penthouse around 2 this morning. Dale's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. They disabled the security systems, knew exactly when to strike. This was planned, coordinated. Where did they take him? Alara's heart hammered against her ribs. A private facility outside the city. They call it a wellness center, but it's where Knox sends people for what he calls memory correction therapy. Dale's voice dripped with disgust. It's really just a place where they break people down and rebuild them the way Knox wants them. Alara felt sick. We have to get him out. There's something else you need to see. Dale handed her a thick manila envelope. These were delivered to Draven's office an hour ago. Inside, Alara found official-looking documents, resignation letters, legal declarations, and a handwritten note that made her blood run cold. It appeared to be in Draven's handwriting, stating he was voluntarily seeking treatment to correct delusional thinking and cutting all ties with Alara James. "This isn't real," she whispered, tears blurring her vision. "He wouldn't. Of course it's not real," Dale said firmly. "Knox is trying to break your spirit, make you believe Draven chose to leave. But I saw the security footage before they wiped it. Draven fought them every step of the way." They drove to Dale's small house on the outskirts of town, where he had converted his garage into a command center. Maps and blueprints covered one wall, and multiple computer screens displayed security camera feeds and personnel schedules. "I've been preparing for something like this," Dale explained, pulling up detailed schematics of the facility. "Knox has been threatening Draven for months, ever since he started showing signs of changing, becoming more compassionate, less cutthroat. The board members who support Knox see it as weakness." Alara studied the facility layout, pushing aside her fear to focus on the task at hand. "How heavily guarded is it?" 24 armed security personnel working rotating shifts, plus medical staff and administrators. Dale pointed to various entry points. "But I have contacts, other veterans who owe me favors, people who don't like Knox's methods." Throughout the afternoon, they worked tirelessly. Dale made calls to trusted allies, while Alara pored over staff schedules and security protocols. Her librarian's eye for detail proved invaluable as she spotted patterns in the guard rotations. "Here," she said, pointing to a gap in coverage. "Every night at 11:45, the East Wing cameras go dark for exactly 3 minutes during system backup. If we time it right..." Dale nodded approvingly. "That's our window. I've got 4 men willing to help, all ex-military, all skilled at covert ops, and I've got someone on the inside who can tell us exactly where they're holding Draven." As evening approached, Alara stepped outside for a moment, needing fresh air. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades that reminded her painfully of yesterday's perfect moment with Draven. She touched her lips, remembering their kiss, the way he'd looked at her with such love and hope. The door opened behind her, and Dale joined her on the small porch. "We're going to get him back," he said quietly. Alara turned to face him, her eyes fierce despite the tears threatening to fall. "I lost him once before, when we were children. I won't lose him again. Whatever it takes, whatever I have to do, I'm getting him back." Dale saw the steel in her spine, the determination that had replaced her earlier fear. "Knox underestimated you," he said. "He thinks you're just a quiet librarian who'll believe his lies and walk away broken-hearted. Knox doesn't understand what Draven and I share," Alara said firmly. "He doesn't understand that some bonds are stronger than time, stronger than death itself. I didn't believe in reincarnation before, but I believe in Draven, and I'm not giving up on him." They went back inside, where the rescue plan was taking final shape. Maps were marked with entry and exit routes, timing was coordinated down to the second, and contingencies were put in place for every possible scenario. As night fell, Alara sat at Dale's kitchen table, memorizing her role in tomorrow's operation. Her hands were steady now, her mind clear. The initial shock and grief had crystallized into pure determination. Somewhere in that facility, Draven was waiting, possibly afraid, possibly being subjected to whatever cruel therapy Knox had designed to erase his memories of her. But Alara knew something Nox didn't. Love like theirs couldn't be erased. It had already survived death once, and tomorrow she would prove just how far she would go to protect it. Dale watched her from across the room, impressed by her transformation from the gentle librarian he'd first met to this fierce, focused woman. He'd served with some of the bravest soldiers in the world, but there was something special about the quiet courage of someone fighting for love. The night deepened around them as they continued their preparations, each passing hour bringing them closer to the moment when they would either save Draven or lose him forever. But Alara refused to consider failure. She had recognized the truth in Draven's eyes when he kissed her at sunset, and no amount of Nox's manipulation could make her doubt it. Tomorrow, they would bring him home. The Tuesday morning sky hung heavy with clouds, a solid sheet of grey that seemed to mirror the weight in Alara's heart. She sat in the back of an unmarked black van, wedged between computer equipment and tactical gear, her fingers wrapped tightly around the paper star charm she'd kept all these years. The charm was worn now, its edges soft from years of handling, but it still gave her comfort. Dale sat up front, his posture rigid as he navigated through the pre-dawn traffic. In the seats behind him, 4 of Draven's most trusted employees checked their equipment one final time. They were an unlikely rescue team, corporate analysts and tech experts turned temporary commandos, but their loyalty to Draven was absolute. The facility is disguised as a private medical research center, Dale explained, his voice steady and professional. Nox's security team runs 3 shifts. We've identified the weakest point during the 5:15 morning shift change. He glanced in the rearview mirror, making eye contact with each team member. Remember your assignments. Timing is everything. Alara closed her eyes, offering up a silent prayer. The fear in her chest warred with an unexpected sense of strength, as if Jordan's spirit somehow lived in both the paper star and in her heart, giving her courage. She thought of Draven, of the gentleness behind his carefully constructed facade, of the way he looked at her with such recognition and love. The van turned off the main highway onto a service road that wound through an industrial district. Warehouses and manufacturing plants rose up around them, their metal walls reflecting the weak morning light. The medical facility sat at the end of a private drive, surrounded by high fences topped with razor wire. Dale parked in the shadow of an abandoned warehouse, just out of sight of the security cameras. Marcus, he addressed one of Draven's employees, start the loop on their surveillance system. Marcus nodded, his fingers flying over a laptop keyboard. Ready in 3, 2, 1. We're good. They're seeing yesterday's normal morning footage. Sarah, do you have access to their internal communications? A woman with short grey hair nodded, adjusting her headset. All their radio traffic is coming through clear. Shift change proceeding normally. Alara watched the facility through the van's tinted windows, her heart pounding. Somewhere in that building, Draven was being held against his will, possibly subjected to whatever cruel methods Nox had devised to strip away his memories of her, of Jordan, of everything that made him who he truly was. It's time, Dale announced quietly. Everyone check your earpieces. Sarah will coordinate from here. The rest of us move in teams of 2. Remember, we're not here for confrontation. This is strictly stealth and extraction. They slipped out of the van like shadows. Dale led Alara toward a service entrance while the others moved to their assigned positions. The morning air bit at her face, and her breath came out in small white clouds. Security is lightest in the East Wing, Dale whispered as they waited behind a dumpster. When Marcus kills the power to the card readers, we'll have exactly 90 seconds before the backup system kicks in. Alara nodded, her fingers still clutching the paper star. She thought of all the quiet mornings she'd spent in her library, never imagining she'd find herself here, about to break into a heavily guarded facility. But love, she was learning, made you brave in ways you never expected. Sarah's voice came through their earpieces. Guard patrol passing north entrance. Marcus, stand by. The seconds ticked by with excruciating slowness. Ilara could hear her own heart beat, too loud in her ears. Now, Sarah announced. The small red lights on the card readers went dark. Dale moved immediately, Ilara close behind him. They slipped through the service entrance and into a sterile white hallway that smelled of disinfectant and fear. Dale led them through a maze of corridors, consulting a memorized floor plan. They passed empty offices and darkened conference rooms. Twice they had to duck into doorways to avoid early arriving staff members. The medical wing is underground, Dale breathed. 2 levels down. They found the stairwell and descended quickly, their footsteps eerily quiet on the concrete steps. The temperature dropped as they went deeper, and the fluorescent lighting took on a harsher quality. At the bottom of the stairs they could hear it, a steady mechanical humming that seemed to vibrate through the walls themselves. Dale held up his hand, stopping Ilara as voices approached from around the corner. Patient continues to resist cognitive reconstruction, a clinical voice was saying. Recommend increasing the dosage for the next session. Knox wants results by the end of the week. Another voice replied. Do whatever it takes. Ilara's fingers tightened around the paper star until her knuckles went white. The voices faded, and Dale signaled them forward again. Moved down another hallway, this one lined with heavy doors marked only with numbers. The humming grew louder, seeming to come from behind one particular door, number 13. Dale pressed his earpiece. Sarah, we need access to medical wing, room 13. Working on it. Sarah's voice crackled. Stand by. Ilara stared at the door, knowing Draven was just on the other side. The humming seemed to mock her, a mechanical drone that represented everything cold and cruel about Knox's attempt to erase love itself. Got it, Sarah announced. Lock disengaging in 3, 2, 1. A soft click echoed in the hallway. Dale reached for the handle, but Ilara stopped him with a touch. Let me, she whispered. Let me be the first thing he sees. Dale nodded, understanding in his eyes, and stepped back to guard the hallway. Ilara took a deep breath, still holding the paper star charm that had carried her through so many dark moments. Then she opened the door, ready to face whatever waited on the other side, ready to bring Draven home. The room hit Ilara with a wave of cold air and antiseptic smell. Medical equipment lined the walls, their displays casting an eerie blue glow across the stark space. In the center, on a narrow metal-framed bed, lay Draven. Her heart clenched at the sight of him, so different from the powerful man she knew. His usual commanding presence was diminished, his face pale and drawn. Clear tubes ran from his arms to softly whirring machines, and his eyes stared vacantly at the ceiling, unfocused and dull. "Oh, Draven," she whispered, rushing to his side. His hand was ice-cold when she took it between both of hers, trying to warm it with her touch. Behind her, Dale quietly secured the door and began examining the medical equipment. "Little Star," Ilara said softly, her voice breaking on the childhood nickname he had given her so long ago. "I'm here. I found you." No response flickered in his empty gaze. Whatever drugs they had given him kept him floating in some distant place she couldn't reach. She squeezed his hand tighter, refusing to let the fear overwhelm her. "Do you remember the paper stars we used to make? How you taught me to fold them just right?" Tears blurred her vision, but she blinked them away. "You always said mine came out crooked, but you kept every single one." Dale moved around the room, systematically disconnecting monitors and IV lines with precise, careful movements. The mechanical humming began to fade as machines went dark one by one. "Remember last Sunday?" Alara continued, her thumb stroking Draven's palm. "The cliff overlooking the city? You said you'd been wanting to show me that view since you were Jordan, that you'd imagined sharing that moment with me across 2 lifetimes. Her voice caught. "You held my hands just like this, and you told me I was your constant star, the one truth you could always find your way back to." Something flickered in Draven's eyes. The smallest shift, like ripples disturbing still water. Alara leaned closer, her heart racing. "Think about that sunset, Draven. The way the light painted everything gold. How the wind caught my hair, and you tucked it back behind my ear." She pressed her forehead to their joined hands. "Remember how it felt when you kissed me? Like coming home after being lost for so long?" A tremor ran through his fingers. Alara looked up to find tears gathering in his eyes, awareness seeping back into their depths like watercolors bleeding across paper. "Little star?" His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Yes," she breathed, her own tears falling freely now. "Yes, it's me. I'm right here." "They tried to—" He blinked hard, struggling against the lingering effects of sedation. "Nox wanted to make me forget." "I know, but they failed." Alara helped him sit up slowly, as Dale disconnected the last of the monitoring equipment. "They could never really take me from your heart. Not then, not now." Draven's hands shook as he reached for her face, his touch gentle despite his weakness. "I heard you calling. Through all the fog and darkness, I heard your voice." "We need to move," Dale interrupted softly from the doorway. "Nox's security will be making rounds soon." Alara slipped her arm around Draven's waist, supporting him as he swung his legs over the side of the bed. His movements were unsteady, but determination hardened his features with each passing moment. "Can you walk?" she asked. He nodded, jaw set. "With your help." They made their way through the underground corridors, Dale leading while Alara helped Draven navigate each step. Though he grew stronger as the drugs continued wearing off, he kept his arm around her shoulders, as if the physical connection anchored him to reality. Sarah's voice crackled through their earpieces. "Security alert just triggered in the medical wing. They know he's gone. Get out now." They quickened their pace, adrenaline lending speed to their movements. Distant shouts echoed through the hallways behind them as Nox's men discovered the empty room. Dale guided them through a service exit and into the pre-dawn darkness, where their vehicle waited with the engine running. Alara helped Draven into the back seat before climbing in beside him. He immediately reached for her hand, entwining their fingers as Dale accelerated away from the facility. In the growing distance, alarm lights began flashing against the lightening sky. "I was so lost," Draven whispered, his voice stronger now but still rough with emotion. He lifted their joined hands to press against his heart. "But you called me home, little star. You always bring me home." Alara leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. The paper star charm was still clutched in her free hand, a small reminder of the love that had transcended death itself, a love that even Nox's cruel machines couldn't erase. "Always," she promised softly as the city skyline emerged on the horizon, painted in the first gentle colors of dawn. Always and forever. Sunlight filtered through the safe house's bulletproof windows, casting warm patches across the hardwood floors. The modest 3-bedroom home sat nestled in a quiet suburban neighborhood, its ordinary appearance masking state-of-the-art security systems and reinforced walls. Inside, Alara sat perched on the edge of a plush armchair, watching Draven sleep peacefully on the living room couch. The morning light highlighted the shadows under his eyes, testament to his ordeal at Nox's facility. Yet his face appeared softer now, unburdened by the constant tension he'd carried before. Alara reached out to adjust the thick blanket covering him, her touch gentle enough not to disturb his rest. Dale's quiet footsteps approached from the kitchen, where he'd been coordinating with their allies since dawn. He carried 3 steaming cups of coffee on a wooden tray, setting it down on the coffee table with barely a sound. "How is he?" Dale asked in a low voice, handing Alara one of the cups. She wrapped her hands around the warm ceramic, inhaling the comforting aroma. "Better. The color's coming back to his face, and his sleep seems more natural now." As if responding to their voices, Draven stirred, his eyelids fluttering open. For a moment, confusion clouded his features. Then his gaze found Alara, and relief washed over him like a wave. "You're still here," he murmured, pushing himself up to sitting position. Alara moved to sit beside him, offering steady support as he adjusted the blanket. "Of course I am. We all are." Dale pressed a cup of coffee into Draven's hands. "Careful, sir. It's hot." Draven took a careful sip, then looked between his 2 companions with eyes that held both gratitude and regret. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "The pain I must have caused you both when Nox had me taken—" "Don't," Alara interrupted gently, placing her hand over his. "You have nothing to apologize for. Nox is the only one responsible for what happened." Dale nodded in agreement, his normally stoic expression softening. "Speaking of Nox, we've been gathering evidence all morning. Sarah and the team have been working around the clock, pulling data from the facility's servers." Draven straightened, his business instincts clearly surfacing despite his fatigue. "Show me." Dale retrieved his laptop from the dining room table, where stacks of documents and multiple screens created a makeshift command center. He returned to sit across from them, opening folders of digital evidence. "First, we have testimony from 3 former employees of the facility," Dale explained, turning the screen so they could see. "They've provided detailed accounts of Nox's involvement in developing and implementing the memory alteration procedures. 2 of them specifically mention your case." Alara felt Draven tense beside her as he read through the statements. His hand found hers, squeezing gently as though drawing strength from the connection. "There's more," Dale continued, clicking through to another folder. "Financial records showing Nox's investments in the facility through shell companies, email correspondence between him and the lead researchers. And this—" he pulled up a video file. "Security footage from the day you were brought in." The grainy footage showed Nox himself supervising as an unconscious Draven was wheeled through sterile corridors. Alara's breath caught at the cold calculation in Nox's expression as he directed the medical team. "That's enough," she said quietly, noticing how Draven's breathing had become shallow. Dale immediately closed the video. "Sorry, sir. I should have warned you." Draven shook his head, his voice stronger than before. "No, we need to see everything. Every piece of evidence matters if we're going to stop him." Throughout the day, they reviewed document after document. Dale's team continued sending new findings, building permits obtained through bribes, falsified medical records, witness statements from other victims of Nox's therapy. Alara stayed close to Draven, offering quiet support as he processed the scope of Nox's betrayal. By late afternoon, Draven had regained much of his usual sharpness, though tempered now with a new thoughtfulness. He worked with Dale to organize the most compelling evidence, planning how best to present it to the authorities and the public. As evening approached, Alara ordered dinner for everyone, simple comfort food that filled the safe house with homey aromas. They ate together in the living room, the casual atmosphere a stark contrast to the weight of their task. After the meal, Draven stood by the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in deep purples and oranges. Alara joined him, noting how he stood straighter now, more sure of himself. "I'm ready," he said suddenly, turning to face her. Ready to face Knox, to tell the whole truth. No more hiding, no more fear. Alara studied his face in the fading light, seeing both the powerful businessman and the vulnerable soul who had found his way back to her. "You don't have to be afraid anymore," she reminded him softly. "Your strength isn't in making others fear you. It's in your capacity for compassion, in choosing to do what's right, even when it's hard." A gentle smile touched his lips as he drew her closer. "You always see the best in me, little star, even when I couldn't see it myself." Dale tactfully busied himself with the documents, giving them a moment of privacy. The evening settled around them like a comfortable blanket as they moved back to the couch, shoulders touching, hands naturally finding each other. Draven's eyes grew heavy as the day's exertions caught up with him. Alara pulled the blanket over both of them as he slowly drifted off, his head coming to rest against her shoulder. She stayed still, listening to his steady breathing, feeling truly safe for the first time since his abduction. The last rays of sunset faded into darkness as Dale dimmed the lights, maintaining his quiet vigil by the command center. Alara felt her own exhaustion creeping in, but she didn't fight it. Here, surrounded by loyal protectors, with Draven's hand warm in hers, she could finally rest without fear. As sleep approached, she thought about tomorrow and all the challenges they would face. But for now, in this peaceful moment, they had won. They had found each other again, across time and space and memory itself. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The Thursday morning air crackled with tension as media crews swarmed the plaza outside Locke Industries headquarters. Camera operators jostled for position while reporters checked their microphones, all eyes fixed on the podium bearing the company's sleek logo. Inside the building's executive level, Alara helped straighten Draven's tie, noting how his hands trembled slightly despite his composed expression. "You're doing the right thing," she whispered, smoothing his jacket lapels. "Thanks to you," he replied softly, covering her hand with his own for a moment. Dale appeared in the doorway, his usual calm presence reassuring. "Everything's in place, sir. The federal agents are standing by to move on Knox the moment we release the evidence." Draven nodded, squaring his shoulders. "Then it's time." They took the elevator down together, Draven between Dale and Alara like anchors keeping him steady. The security team had cleared a path through the lobby, holding back the press until they reached the podium. Camera flashes exploded as Draven stepped up, Dale and Alara positioning themselves supportively behind him. The crowd fell silent as Draven adjusted the microphone. Under the bright morning sun, he looked both powerful and humbled, no longer the cold corporate titan, but something more deeply human. "Good morning," he began, his voice clear and steady. "I've called this press conference to address recent events and reveal truths that have been hidden for too long. Many of you have speculated about my brief disappearance last week. Today, I'm going to tell you exactly what happened." A rustling went through the crowd as reporters leaned forward, pens poised. Alara watched Draven's back straighten as he continued. "Bradford Knox, CEO of Knox Enterprises, orchestrated my abduction and imprisonment in an illegal medical facility. His goal was to force me through experimental memory alteration procedures, essentially to chemically reprogram my personality to maintain control over my company's direction." Gasps and mutters erupted from the journalists. Camera shutters clicked rapidly as Draven held up a hand for silence. "I know this sounds incredible. That's why we've prepared extensive evidence, which is being delivered to federal authorities as I speak." He gestured to Dale, who nodded confirmation while checking his phone. "This evidence includes security footage, witness testimony, financial records, and documented proof of similar procedures performed on other victims." Hands shot up throughout the crowd. Draven pointed to a reporter in the front row. Mr. Locke, are you saying Bradford Knox attempted to chemically alter your brain? Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Knox has been secretly funding research into memory manipulation, targeting business rivals, and anyone else who threatens his interests. I was merely his latest victim. Another reporter called out, "How did you escape?" Draven's expression softened as he glanced back at Alara. "Through the courage and loyalty of people who refused to let Knox succeed. My head of security, Dale Hale, led a rescue operation with trusted employees. But more importantly, someone reminded me who I really am. Not the ruthless businessman Knox wanted me to remain, but someone capable of change and growth." The questions came rapid fire now. Are you pressing charges? What evidence do you have? How will this affect the proposed merger? Draven answered each query with newfound openness, no longer hiding behind corporate jargon or intimidation tactics. When he described his intention to reshape Locke Industries' culture, emphasizing integrity and social responsibility, several reporters exchanged skeptical glances. "I understand your doubt," he acknowledged. "I've earned a reputation for cold efficiency at any cost. But recent events have shown me there's strength in compassion, not weakness. This company will continue to succeed, not by destroying competition, but by leading through innovation and ethical practices." As he spoke, Dale's phone buzzed. He checked it and gave Alara a subtle nod. The federal authorities were moving on Knox. The press conference continued for another hour, as Draven detailed specific policy changes and answered questions about the future of his company. Through it all, Alara stood quietly supportive, watching him step fully into this new version of himself. By early afternoon, news networks were broadcasting footage of Knox being led from his office in handcuffs. The charges read like a legal textbook: conspiracy, fraud, human rights violations, attempted corporate espionage, and more. Knox's carefully crafted empire began crumbling as investors and board members distanced themselves. Draven spent hours in meetings with his legal team and board of directors, explaining everything in detail and laying out his vision for the company's future. Alara waited patiently, knowing he needed to handle this part alone. As evening approached, he finally emerged from the conference room, looking tired but peaceful. Without a word, he took her hand and led her to the private elevator that accessed the building's rooftop. The sun was setting as they stepped out into the cool air, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. City lights were beginning to twinkle below them, like earthbound stars. Draven led her to the edge where a glass barrier offered protection while preserving the spectacular view. "I never came up here before," he admitted, looking out over the city. "I was always too busy working, plotting, pushing for more power. I forgot how to simply be present in a moment." Alara squeezed his hand gently. "And now?" He turned to face her, his eyes soft in the fading light. "Now I understand what really matters. You saved me, Alara. Not just from Knox and that facility, but from the person I was becoming. You helped me remember not just Jordan's memories, but his heart. My heart. You did the hard work yourself," she reminded him. "You chose to change, to be vulnerable, to stand up for what's right. Because you showed me it was possible." He drew her closer, one hand coming up to cup her cheek. "In every way that matters, emotionally, spiritually, literally, you brought me back to life. You called me home." The city continued to sparkle below them as day faded into dusk, but neither paid attention to the view anymore. In that moment, on the rooftop where the powerful man had finally found his heart again, they held each other close, grateful for second chances and the mysterious ways love finds its way back home. The Friday morning sun painted golden streaks across the senior housing complex as Draven and Alara walked hand in hand through the well-kept gardens. The recent drama with Knox felt like a distant storm cloud, replaced by the warmth of genuine smiles from residents who spotted them. "Mr. Locke, Ms. James," called out Mrs. Peterson, an elderly widow who had lived there for 15 years. She hobbled forward with her walker, beaming. "We've been praying for you both since the news broke." "Thank you," Draven replied softly, his corporate mask completely gone. "How are the improvements coming along?" "Oh, the new elevator is a blessing, and those garden beds you had installed, perfect height for these old bones." As they continued their walk, more residents approached to share their gratitude. A veteran named George proudly showed them his flourishing tomato plants in the community garden. Sarah, a retired teacher, hugged Ilara tightly and whispered, "He's different with you, dear. We can all see it." In the afternoon sun, Draven gathered the residents in the community room. "I have an announcement," he began, glancing at Ilara with warm eyes. "Locke Industries owns a building downtown that's been sitting empty. We're converting it into a community foundation, a place that will serve seniors, veterans, and children." The room erupted in applause. Ilara squeezed his hand, proud tears in her eyes. As evening approached, they drove to Aunt Rosamond's cozy home, where delicious aromas wafted from the kitchen. Dale joined them, looking relaxed in casual clothes instead of his usual security attire. "Well, young man," Aunt Rosamond said, pointing her wooden spoon at Draven, "it certainly took you long enough to find her again." Everyone laughed, the tension of recent events melting away like butter on Rosamond's fresh-baked rolls. "Worth every minute of waiting," Draven replied softly. They gathered around Rosamond's well-worn dining table, sharing stories and passing dishes of comfort food. Dale revealed a surprising talent for baking, having brought a homemade apple pie. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter and moments of thoughtful reflection. Looking around at Draven's gentle smile, Dale's protective presence, and her aunt's knowing eyes, Ilara felt the pieces of her life finally clicking into place. This wasn't just a gathering. It was the beginning of a family, bound together by more than blood or circumstance. The Saturday morning light streamed through the library windows, casting warm patterns across the freshly vacuumed carpet. Ilara hummed softly as she arranged colourful cushions in the reading nook, preparing for the day's community celebration. The familiar scent of books and wood polish filled the air as she worked, her mind peaceful despite the early hour. The soft click of the front door made her turn. There stood Draven, impeccably dressed as always, but with an unusually tender expression. In his hands he held a small velvet box that made her heart skip. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said softly, walking toward her. "Never," she replied, noticing how his steps led them directly to the reading nook where they'd first met just weeks ago. Draven's hands trembled slightly as he opened the box. Inside lay a delicate silver necklace, and hanging from it was something that made Ilara's breath catch, the paper star charm from their childhood, carefully preserved and protected in clear resin. "I kept it safe," he whispered, "just like I kept my promise to find you again." As he fastened the necklace around her neck, the sound of children's voices drifted in from outside, arriving early for story hour. Ilara wrapped her arms around him, breathing in the moment. "You did find me," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Across time itself." They stood together in the morning light, their hands intertwined, ready to step into whatever the future held. The love they shared had transcended death, memory and pain to bring them to this moment, a new beginning grounded in compassion and purpose. The children's laughter grew louder outside, a joyful soundtrack to their shared moment of peace. Hand in hand, they moved forward together, their story proving that some bonds truly are strong enough to span lifetimes. "Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.